Welcome to Slide 2. You may recall that in the introduction I made mention of the analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. But what if you are not given the complete picture? I will now extend this idea to that of playing a game. At the start of the game you are given the prime purpose, which is more often enough a set of words and perhaps a picture. Unfortunately, achieving this purpose is virtually impossible without actually playing and completing the game. So in this article I'll outline the 4 chapters I'll be covering, and what each chapter covers, a brief description of the content, and what sort of person would benefit from the content. Before I go any further, I must issue a censorship warning. This presentation is strictly for adults only. Adolescents and children will not benefit from it, as their idea of fun differs greatly from those of the adult. Now, I'm not rating this as a mature age 18+, as adolescency does not necessarily end at 20, nor childhood at puberty. As I do not have a degree in psychology, I had to arrive at this conclusion based on my studies and observations of human nature, whereby I had to derive a more scientific approach of calculating the mental age of a person. This work was woven into a body of work I called Prisms, which can be played with at www.repose.org/prisms, all in lowercase. One further point on my interpretation of the adult is that the adult is quite willing to take responsibility to understand that every word has synonyms. For example, esteem could also mean love or honor, and antonyms. For example, peace has war as an antonym, or wisdom, ignorance. It is this lack of understanding that will cause a person to miss the rich tapestry provided by the anatomy of information. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, not every adult will be interested in every aspect of this presentation. However, I would strongly recommend that the technically minded person review all the slides, as there are technical issues in everything which needs to be understood, whereas the non-technical person may skip slides 27 through 30. However, I will recommend that as there are only 4 slides, it may give a great insight into what the technical person has to deal with. So who needs to know about the anatomy of information? I may be repeating myself, however I want to be quite explicit and upfront as to what I regard the anatomy of information looks like. During the course of the 31 remaining slides, I will be presenting as what I believe to be the 11 major problems facing all of us, introducing 8 mathematical formula and 60 constant information artifacts. Hence some of the slides may not be relevant to all people. In other words, each slide requires a person to have a different set of skills and abilities, and I will explain the type of person who needs this knowledge in more detail on the next slide. Suffice it to say, there are 3 types of people, namely the dreamer, logician, and practitioner. Chapter 2 will deal with what I believe the anatomy of information looks like. Firstly, it is subdivided into 3 major components, phases or stages. And secondly, each one of these 3 is further subdivided into additional layers. I'll present 5 slides showing the overview of the anatomy, how many searches I am saving everybody, a mathematical formula covering the anatomy, and a summary. The summary slide will reveal what, to my way of thinking, is a structure that best fits Benjamin Franklin's quote, "A place for everything, everything in its place," and prevents trying to solve a problem using more than one solution, which often leads to redundancies, or using a wrong approach at the wrong time, which usually ends in a stalemate and a reworking of effort. Both of these waste valuable resources, that is, time and money. This anatomy should demonstrate that I have removed all the redundant steps in all the cycles of action, and hence revealed an efficient and effective pathway to ensure the delivery of due diligence or governance. This brings us to Chapter 3, which is the quote engine room unquote of the presentation and will comprise of 16 slides. As I mentioned in my introduction, I will explain how every problem has a cause which produces an effect. This principle was first recorded as being stated by Aristotle 384 to 322 BCE. And as there are 1,000+ problem solution approaches, I will use a simple formula to demonstrate how the effect of a cause creates a result which can be viewed as either a structure or a function, and how if the result is a structure, then that will cause another problem or problems. I will demonstrate how once a pattern within the cycle of action is established, it can then be used to streamline problem solving without redundancies or the need to transmogrify the next step, and thus save a lot of resources. Patterns are attributed to Plato circa 428 to circa 348 BCE, called patterns, form of the good. I mentioned there are 11 problems requiring solving, 8 of which need to be solved by the dreamers using 15 slides, 6 formula, and 60 constant information artifacts. The remaining 3 problems will be solved by the practitioner using 4 slides and 1 formula. However, it will require the logicians to help convert a dream into a practical reality. My advice is that whatever type you are, you should try to watch every slide in order to fully understand how the anatomy of information resolves all 11 problems. This brings me to my last chapter, in which I will tell you that I told you. I will use 3 slides summarizing the anatomy, reveal the repose periodic table, as well as the relationship between the anatomy, the logicians, and Caspar. Well, let's get on to the next slide and see who needs to know what the anatomy looks like.